Welcome to Andy Staples On3. We are hurtling toward another game week. There's actually games tonight, and there's some very interesting games on Friday, including Utah at Oregon State. There's a lot going on this weekend. It's interesting because not the marquee matchups of last weekend, but a lot of really intriguing ones, including one we'll talk about quite a bit today, Texas and Kansas. Lance Leipold, Kansas coach, joins us later in the show to talk about just how they've turned that program around in a relatively short time. I mean, it's amazing when you think about it, that they were hired basically the day before the spring game in 2021. Les Miles gets fired. It's a very tumultuous time. And you thought, oh, how's this ever going to work? But Lance Leipold has built that thing pretty quickly, used the transfer portal, also just done a good job coaching, kind of what you'd expect from a guy who won 6 Division III national titles at Wisconsin Whitewater. So it is going to be a fun one. We got folks throwing up hook 'em horns in the chat already. It is going to be a good week. Got people taking your suggestions. You guys remember I did the live reaction show from Orlando from the Florida State LSU game, and probably spent, I would say, a solid 5 minutes of that show, me plus you guys in the comments, where we just commiserated over how sad we were that Harold Perkins was being used in the way he was used in the Florida State game. Well, now it's making Lane Kiffin sad that LSU has changed Harold Perkins back into the ball-seeking monster that he was last year. Let's throw some stats at you. In the Mississippi State game, Harold Perkins had 4 tackles, which doesn't sound like much, but one of those was a sack, 2 total tackles for loss, and a pass breakup. Against Arkansas, 6 tackles, 1 sack, another half tackle for loss to in addition to that, and 2 forced fumbles. He is, yes, impacting games again. And Lane Kiffin was asked about that because Ole Miss is hosting LSU. And Lane, he's not happy with the change.
I mean, I don't know if they've talked about it, but it looks like they tried to play him like a normal backer in week 1 and play him like a boundary wheel backer, and looks like they scratched that after the Florida State game and went back to last year's plan and put him out there and make a few calls with him, let him play. So I wish they'd put him back in there. Maybe you can talk to him.
That's a very different tone from Lane from his trolling of Alabama last week. They were a little humbled by Alabama last week, but I think that game between LSU and Ole Miss can be a little more interesting than the second half of that Alabama-Ole Miss game. I'm guessing that LSU's secondary does not present the same challenge to Ole Miss's passing game that Alabama's secondary did. I do think LSU will still be able to throw the ball quite well, though. But Harold Perkins could make the biggest difference in that game if he is the one hammering Jackson Dart over and over again, or potentially breaking up a pass, causing an interception, forcing a fumble. All of the things that Harold Perkins does that can help you win games, he's doing it. And yeah, Lane, I don't blame you. I would want them to move him back too, but they're not going to. Let's go to Austin. Steve Sarkisian got asked about, as you would expect, the last time Kansas went to Austin. Remember that crazy game? Walk-on fullback catches a pass in double overtime. Kansas pulls the upset. It was the low point of Sark's first year at Texas and the high point of Lance Leipold's first year at Kansas. But it's interesting this week because both coaches really don't want to talk much about that game because they're so different as teams now. Texas feels like a legitimate college football playoff contender. And Kansas, that was just a plucky underdog story at that time. Kansas is flat out good right now. They're 4-0. They've started out 4-0 in consecutive seasons for the first time since 1914 and 1915, the last time they did this. And it's not gimmicky. Like, they're just playing really well. Jalon Daniels, one of the best quarterbacks in the country. You heard Ralph Russo from the Associated Press on the show last night saying he thinks Jayden Daniels is the best quarterback in the Big 12. And I think you'd find a lot of coaches who have to prepare for Jalon Daniels who would tell you that, who would believe that. So, but it was interesting because Sark got asked earlier this week about what does he say to his players about 2 years ago? Does he use that as motivation for them? I really liked his answer.
I think after the game Saturday, you talked about how there were players who lost at Baylor in 2021 and that could celebrate the win in 2023. Do you use a similar message this week, considering what happened last time you played Kansas here? Or do you try to stay positive with this team on a different
I think
way?
this much, I kind of referenced it to the team this morning. We've come a long way as a program, and in a lot of phases. Schematically, the roster, the culture, the environment at DKR. We don't have to go backwards. We're going to keep forging forward, and we've got a lot of goals that we're trying to obtain this year, and we're trying to reach. We recognize Kansas is a good football team, but to try to make our guys feel bad for losing the game 2 years ago that it sucked for everybody. I don't know what benefit that is. We got to focus on the task at hand, and that's playing this Kansas team, because this Kansas team is a lot different than that Kansas team 2 years ago as well.
He's exactly right. Neither Kansas nor Texas in any way resembles the teams that played at DKR 2 years ago. There are, yes, some of the same players on the roster, but it's just not the same situation. Both of those teams have matured. They're considerably better now. I really like the way Texas handled its business against Baylor last week. You heard me all offseason. All offseason I said, this is the most talented Texas has been in a long time. This is the first time in a long time they've had legit NFL dudes on both lines of scrimmage, that they've had really interesting skill talent that will be drafted very high. Well, Kansas is really good too. That's one of those you flip on the tape and you go, oh, they can beat us if we're not careful. And this is not the coaches have to tell the players this. The players at Texas can see this when they flip on the Kansas tape. And Sark got asked about Jalon Daniels too. And I thought this was another good answer, because this is what opposing coaches see when they are watching that Kansas offense now.
I think it's multiple. The thing that he does is he's a real dual threat. I think the natural thing is we think about the runs that he has for explosive plays, but he throws the ball all over the place, and they've got great schemes and concepts. It's not by any means is it gimmicky. They're running real pass concepts that stress your coverages, and then they have the run concepts with his legs as an added element to it. The +1 runs with the quarterback run. So he taxes you both ways. So it's not like you can just have a guy be a scout team quarterback that's a runner. You have to have the ability to throw it to give the defense a realistic look about what they're going to be going up against.
It is going to be a challenge for that Texas defense, but this obviously will be the best defensive line that Kansas has seen. But it's interesting because they did play Illinois. You heard the law firm on this show from Big Ten Media Days, Johnny Newton and Keith Randolph, really good D tackles. Probably not at the level of what they'll see with Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy and Alfred Collins, but a good challenge. And I thought Kansas handled that very well. But this is going to be a fun game. I don't know. You heard me and Ralph talking about it last night. I think Texas is going to win this game, but I'm not sure it's going to be a blowout. Last year, Texas ran all over Kansas with Bijan Robinson. This year, I think Quinn Ewers, JT Sanders, Xavier Worthy, probably going to have to do a little more in the pass game to make the score look the same if they want to do that. And there'll probably be a little more stress, as Steve Sarkisian pointed out, when they're on defense. So this is one of the games I'm very excited about this weekend, and there's a bunch of them. The LSU Ole Miss game we mentioned, Duke Notre Dame, that's going to be a lot of fun. Florida Kentucky should be a lot of fun. That feels like a toss-up. We don't really know what's going to happen. Colorado USC, we'll talk a lot about that game with Erik McKinney of WeAreSC.com. Georgia's going to Auburn. We talked to Justin Hokanson from Auburn Live about that later in the show today. There's a lot to digest, so much to process, and we are going to get into it with Lance Leipold from Kansas. But first, I want to tell you about Prize Picks. It's Thursday night, so it's time to go to that Prize Picks app. If you haven't downloaded already, download the Prize Picks app. Use the referral code Andy. It will get an instant first deposit match up to $100. You deposit $100, they'll match $100. You deposit $50, they'll match you $50. That's how it works. Use the referral code Andy. and then you get to play, and there's already a bunch of options out there. You open the QB passing yards, and you see the squares immediately. Caleb Williams and Shedeur Sanders. What's this going to look like? Is Caleb Williams going to go off in his? This will be the first game that the casual fan is watching a lot of Caleb Williams. That you've had to find him on the Pac-12 network, or you've had to watch him very late at night. That's not the case now. This will be noon Eastern kickoff against Colorado and Coach Prime. Will this game look like the Colorado-Oregon game? That's your question, because Shedeur Sanders, the square for his passing yardage, 307.5. If the game looks like the Oregon game, you're going to want to pick less than there. But I'm not sure the game's going to look like the Oregon game. If you watched USC Arizona State, well, they got gashed a few times. And the question is, can Shedeur Sanders deal with what should be a decent USC pass rush? If he can escape, stay on the move, complete some passes, there's a chance that some of his guys can break him. So do you go more than on that, or do you say, no, the talent discrepancy is too great? It's going to be a lot of fun to watch. And now the question is, if you watch the Oregon-Colorado game, maybe you go to the Marshawn Lloyd square. So they got 92.5 rushing yards for Marshawn Lloyd. You would think if USC looked at what Oregon did and wants to just take control of this game right away, well, you'd think they're going to hand it to Marshawn Lloyd quite a bit. So another game in that same window where the running backs are going to be very important to both teams' success is that Florida-Kentucky game. Trevor Etienne was Florida's best player against Tennessee. He's probably the biggest reason they won that game. Ray Davis for Kentucky has shown that he has breakaway ability. He's made that offense a lot more explosive. Trevor Etienne, 66.5, more or less. Ray Davis, 79.5, more or less. Where do you fall on that? I tend to lean toward more for both of them. And then we'll see, because really how Florida's defensive front plays in that game will have a big effect on the outcome of that game. Do they shut down the run game like they did against Tennessee and force Devin Leary to make the throws? And you want a Devin Leary square? 229.5 passing yards. That's an interesting. And Graham Mertz from Florida, they got it 195.5. Both those offenses are going to be very deliberate. I don't think they're going to be chucking the ball all around the field. If you watch Florida play, Graham Mertz is not throwing deep. He's throwing short, and they're hoping that somebody can catch the ball and make something happen with it. But so many different options, so many games. You can go down to that Duke and Notre Dame game. How do you feel about the rushing yards for Audric Estime? How do you feel about the passing yards for Riley Leonard? And then Ole Miss LSU. We just talked about Harold Perkins. How might he affect the game? Jackson Dart for Ole Miss. His rushing square, 40.5. So if he's got 40.5, that means he's not getting sacked very much. And that means he is moving the chains with his legs every once in a while. That, I think you go more than on that. If that hits, you might be looking at an Ole Miss win there. If you go less than on that, especially if that number veers toward the negative because Mr. Harold Perkins is in his face all the time and getting him down on the ground, then you're probably looking at an LSU win. Mentioned Audric Estime. He was on the show earlier this week. 90.5 rush yards, more or less. Now, there is not a square for Jeremiah Love. And I think that's the interesting one with Estime. I don't even know if it's necessarily the Duke defense. It's how much do they split the carries between Audric Estime and the young backs, including Jeremiah Love, who came on pretty strong there at the end of the Ohio State game. So whole lot to play with. I will be on Friday afternoon making some of my picks. I did okay last week. It wasn't great. I got a 3 out of 5 when I did a flex pick with 5 different quarterbacks. I got 3 to hit. I always do more than because I like to root for people, not against people, although they're Prize Picks is messing with me now. They have an interceptions category. So that's one where you would want to do a less than if you would like to root for the person, and a more than if you would like to root against them. But so many different options available in a bunch of states. Referral code Andy. Go to Prize Picks. Download that app. You're going to have a lot of fun once you start going through those different squares, because you're saying, ooh, now I want to watch this game. Now I want to watch this game. They will match your deposit up to $100 with your first deposit. Referral code is Andy. We'll see you Friday. I want to see what you're playing. You'll see what I'm playing. And then we'll have some fun watching it all happen on Saturday. But right now, one of the guys that will make stuff happen on Saturday, Kansas head coach Lance Leipold, the Jayhawks 4-0, headed to Austin, Texas to face the Longhorns. Here's Lance Leipold. Welcome, Lance Leipold, Kansas Jayhawks head coach. The first coach since 1915 to lead the Jayhawks to a 4-0 start in 2 consecutive seasons. I know you've heard that stat once or twice this week, Coach, but does that blow your mind that pre-World War I the last time this happened?
Yeah, it does. I jokingly said if I obviously didn't do enough research, before I interviewed to really know a little bit what we were stepping into, but at the same time, all the more fulfilling. Under 2.5 years that we've been here to really kind of get this, get a foundation set, and we got a lot to do yet, but we made a lot of progress, and looking forward for the challenges ahead.
Well, and it does seem like you've been able to do this fairly quickly. And I was looking at, because we had Tavondre Sweat on a few weeks ago. He's one of the Texas defensive linemen. I thought, oh man, they're playing a really good defensive line against Texas this week. And I was thinking, I just watched you guys play against Johnny Newton and Keith Randolph from Illinois.
Yeah.
And looked real good against 2 NFL D tackles. And I watched them play against Penn State the next week, and your guys did better against them. So how did you do that with the big guys, especially? Because that seems like that's the hardest thing to get going.
Well, we had a good returning unit of offensive linemen with experience. Starting really at center, Mike Nowitzki's been with us now for 5 years. 2 at Buffalo as a starter, and now he's been a 3-year starter here, taking advantage of the COVID year. So he's our leader up front. Dominic Pooney's now playing left tackle, played left guard last year. He's a D2 transfer from Central Missouri, and boy, he's been as maybe was our best lineman last year. We lost Earl Boswick's on the practice squad for the Cowboys, but everyone else is back and some experience. And we've challenged our group that these are, going to be some physical defensive lines that we're going to play against, physical brand of play. And if we're going to be the team we want to be, that it starts with them, and they've answered that so far.
So you've got those guys have been around. Jalon Daniels has been in the offense for a while now. How much more can you do? Because I've heard your offensive coordinator, Andy, talk about, it's a pro-style offense with spread concepts, meaning there's a lot of eye candy, a lot of pre-snap moving around. How much better are you at that and more efficient at that?
I think we progress each and every week. But from where we were a year ago, I think almost night and day to an extent, because again, as you've been doing this a while as well, and the benefits of those bowl practices. Mm-hmm. And for this program to be in the drought like it was, to get those practices before the bowl game was so valuable. And then the value is the retention that you get when you go back on the field in spring. And we started late February, so we kept the retention. And now with I say modified, but really, to me, one of the best benefits of COVID is when they really kind of loosen some of the time you can spend with your players on the field in the summertime and continue to teach, and you can reference calls and do things. And I think our offense has been able to now, most of our receivers, the running backs, most of those guys are all back. So we've been able to keep building upon that. And like you say, eye candy, we can mess around with different things, shifts, motions, all these different things. And hopefully we find the ways to put some continued stress on the defense.
Yeah, Andy was talking about that a couple of weeks ago, and I found it interesting what he said. It feels like small wrinkles to your guys when you add them at practice, but it feels huge to the defense when they're trying to play against it.
I would agree 100%. And that's kind of, we even way back when my last 2 years as head coach at Wisconsin Whitewater is when Andy joined us, and we were evolving in some ways. And of course, go to Buffalo and we start really square one, installing it, go through the tough 2-10 the second year, and then you kind of build with some younger players again. This one's been able, because of some of these things of player retention and that extra time, that has allowed us to keep doing that. But when whether it be at convention or the camp circuit, so to speak, or on the road recruiting, you run into some of your people that you're playing against, and they make reference to, how much they're upset at you because they got to spend all this extra time looking at it. And we've taken a small page from the Kansas City Chiefs about, letting the players, mess around and give suggestions and give some, fun wrinkles that kind of makes it fun at practice. And you can do that when you got an experienced group and also that can execute. So it's really been working out.
Can your tight end just change the route like Kelsey can?
Well, not quite that yet. They would like to, though. But I'll tell you, and Andy would be the one that could answer a lot better. But, when we said this about, giving suggestions and bringing plays in, he also put the caveat on is that now, guys, it's got to fit into what we're doing and you got to explain it. And it was amazing. Some players that you wouldn't necessarily think would know the ins and outs of some stuff that really had some thought out reasons and why and what it would complement. And that's also gives them some ownership. Yeah. And I think that's also the next part of this. And especially with today's player, you give them a little bit more at stake in this. The buy-in's even better.
Oh, I'm imagining, like, if you're an offensive lineman, you're finding a way to double team somebody. You're finding a way to get a combo block. Yeah. No reach blocks for me. I'm setting this thing up for me. But it's interesting because it does make them, it incentivizes them to understand the scheme better.
It does. But the funny thing is, some of this was we used one against Illinois that is, then they're shifting themselves out to the top of the numbers or shifting back in and, some fun things that they see from time to time. So it also kind of breaks it up, like I said. But you're right. It does give them a little more piece of it and understanding about what we're doing all the time as well as coaches.
So I'm curious about how you handle this psychologically, because you've been in so many different places in your coaching career in terms of what's expected of your team, where you've been at Wisconsin Whitewater, where you're expected not just to win every game, but to win every game by 1,000,000 points. You've been, early at Buffalo, early at Kansas, where you're just rebuilding and you're trying to figure out what's going on. And now you're in a situation where you're supposed to be competitive in every game. Does the way you handle the players psychologically change because of that? Or is it the same approach?
I try to keep, I hope I keep it the same. If anything, I've tried to loosen up. I could look back in my first part of my head coaching career and and I still have it probably, where you're always worried about it, get whatever you've kind of grown to and established, that it's going to get away from you. And, I always say that it's my job to keep pushing, and demanding. And I said, guys, you just need to understand that of me. I said last week after the BYU game, I had to try to get myself in the right frame of mind that I didn't start talking too much about the challenge in Austin without letting these kids enjoy what a good win that was. And, but I did tell them during, maybe it was even, during our first year here, is that we're going to coach you the same way and the same expectations and demanding you to do things right and in a timely manner on and off the field, whether we're 2-10 or 10-2. And I said somewhere along the line that you're going to understand there's not going to be a win or loss that influences our day-to-day process of how we go through things. And we'll appreciate it. We're not going to look in the rearview mirror when we're struggling, and we're not going to sit there to pat ourselves on the back when we're successful.
So let's talk about this defense. You had 2 defensive scores against BYU. Mm-hmm. You're halfway to last year's interception total already. You gave up 9 yards rushing. If you back out sacks, it's still only 33 yards rushing. I mean, how much better has this group gotten?
Well, they've gotten significantly better. And it, part of it I could say for a lot of reasons, Andy, and it's I'll start with, yes, we've added some new pieces. The back seven is more experienced. They're all returning. They understand things better. But when I break it down sometimes to keep it fair to everyone, so to speak, is we inherited a program that was a 3-man front. We transitioned to a 4-man front. As you probably well know through your time, is that this program was vastly under scholarshiped from about 3 coaches ago. Okay. Besides being under scholarship, we were 10 over scholarship on offense versus defense. Wow. So now, we had the recruiting if you really placed it, and I was hired the day before the spring game, and the quick sidebar is I go watch the spring game and they line up in 10 personnel, but yet on the scholarship, there's 5 tight ends scholarshiped and 2 fullbacks. So, so evolving everything back into a segmented by class, by position, by offense and defense has been a process that we've been working through. And then we've had to move players and probably play some guys out of position. But now through the portal and other things, we think we're in a little bit balanced situation. We've been able to add a few guys. We're playing a lot of guys up front that are keeping us fresh. And like I said, the back seven has had a little more experience. And with an addition of a guy or two there, at least in the 2 deep, I think we've been able to play at this level. Now we know it's a huge challenge, and it's really going to be probably measured of improvement down in Austin on Saturday.
I heard you mention in another interview that the last time you guys went to Austin 2 years ago, you had 3 of your DBs that are starting now were starting then, and not one of them weighed over 165 pounds.
Yeah, it was. And in fact, there were times where I think we had 4 literally true freshmen on the field in the secondary at certain times of the game, maybe in a nickel package. And it was men against boys in a lot of different spots. And some of these guys have grown. Some of those guys played well. 2 of those guys, OJ Burrows, who's playing a lot for us and starting, and he had an interception. Kobe Bryant had a pick 6 in that game 2 years ago. But at the same time, when we've been working through and nutrition and strength and everything that we wanted to try to do, that's kind of where it was starting at that time when we were the youngest Power 5 football team in the country in 21.
In terms of body types, because you mentioned switching from a 3-man to a 4-man front, and that there's so much that goes into that in terms of just the type of players you're recruiting. Do you feel like you look on the line of scrimmage on both sides the way you'd like to look?
We're getting there. Yes. I think we've added some length that we didn't have before. Like we moved like a linebacker, Kyron Johnson, ended up being a 6th-round pick for the Eagles.
Oh yeah. But I watched him put Trevor Penning on his butt at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah. He was super twitchy, but undersized for that position, kind of that tweener type guy, but is probably more of a linebacker. But he helped us the first year. Lonnie Phelps, transferred from Miami of Ohio. We thought most of our portal guys too, Andy, we wanted them to be 2+ year guys. Lonnie declared for the draft. We're really hoping he'd return and we could keep adding to it. But I think we're starting to get some more of that 6'3+ guy on the outside, some more length, some arm length there, and then the thicker, wider body on the inside. So it's getting there. Linebacker as well. I kind of say, I jokingly said this our first year, we might have been 2-10 in the record. We were probably 0-12 in the eyeball test on the field in pregame, and that included University of South Dakota and FCS school. We just didn't have the look that we needed in length, speed, size, and everything.
So what you do have, though, is a quarterback that everybody, takes notice of and is scared of to defend. How much has Jalon grown over these past couple of years?
Oh, I think he's grown in so many different ways. If there's between media exposure and NIL opportunity, that alone is probably a hidden thing that people don't understand that helps young men grow up. Not just how many dollars they get, because they have to go do things, puts them in front of they have to act in a professional manner, whether they're doing as a spokesman or meeting people. And that has really helped him. But he continues to grow and prosper as a leader and as a person through adversity. He hasn't stayed the healthiest, and he knows that. But his personality hasn't changed. He's got that smile and charisma that can light up a room, that gets other people excited when he's around. He's encouraged Jason Bean when he wasn't playing. He's been a great teammate. And, through all the success, especially I think sometimes in a program like ours that haven't had much, but there's a lot of people adding to it. But as you know, certain guys are going to be that focal point. He has stayed humble along the way, and that has been very refreshing.
How do you help him in terms of preservation? Because he's such a dynamic runner, but I imagine there are times you tell him, hey, you might want to just throw this one or get down.
We talk about those things, be smart with the ball. There's some of the times, even with some sacks, he's still trying to create. Sometimes we got to live for another day. We went out to the University of Nevada to play and, come away with a close win. Didn't play probably as clean. We didn't play as well as we would have liked. I'm not going to take any, because I think Coach Wilson, his staff, and their team played extremely hard, probably outplayed us. But we didn't put a lot of quarterback run in that game plan. And it was one of those things that we were going to take away some hits. Hopefully, obviously there were some sacks and stuff, but we wanted to minimize that in that game to get ready for conference play. So we do try, but part of what we do is going to make everyone defend the whole field and defend all eligible players. And for us to try to be who we are, we're going to need something out of the quarterback in the run game.
Well, I imagine he will give you a little bit this weekend, but good luck in Austin, Coach, and appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much.
That is Lance Leipold, Kansas head coach, and just an incredible job that he and his staff have done. I realize he's going to get a lot of questions as this goes forward about, hey, are you interested in this job? Interested in this? He should get interest from everybody who has a job opening, but he's doing great at Kansas, and we'll see how serious Kansas is about making sure they keep him, because this has been just a remarkable turnaround when you look at this. Now, Lincoln Riley turned around USC really fast as well. Not as heavy of a lift, but now they go to face Colorado in Boulder. After that Oregon game, it's a little bit different vibe, but I'm guessing it's still going to be star-studded, probably going to be a bunch of celebrities on the sideline. Now, USC may bring its own celebrities. Maybe they're bringing Will Ferrell. Maybe Snoop Dogg shows up. Maybe Dr. Dre shows up. They have their own celebrities at USC, and that's one of the things I asked Erik McKinney from wearesc.com, because this is a program that's used to being the center of attention. Now they go to a place where Colorado has been the center of attention in the whole country all year, but USC, probably the better team. I don't think I'm going out on a limb saying that. And Caleb Williams, the best player on the field. I have no problem saying that. I'm definitely not stretching that, because he's the best player in the country. He's going to be the first pick in the draft next year. He is outstanding. And this will be the first time a lot of the casual fans see him, because USC has either been on the Pac-12 network or has been playing very late, prime time Pacific time games. So now you get to see Caleb Williams in a big time slot, big noon kickoff, noon on the East Coast, 10 a.m. Boulder time, 9 a.m. according to the USC players' body clocks. It's going to be something. We talked to Erik McKinney about the Trojans' trip to Boulder. Joined by Erik McKinney of wearesc.com, On3's USC site. And Erik, it's not often that USC is upstaged in terms of celebrity or star power. Yet as they go to Boulder, they kind of are, even though USC probably has the biggest on-field star in the country in Caleb Williams.
I mean, that's exactly right? Caleb Williams is the draw in college football. And so to pair him now with what Colorado is going to bring, even Colorado coming off that game against Oregon, there are going to be a ton of eyes on this game. I mean, we all know kind of what Colorado has done in terms of being the draw that it's been this year. And this is USC's really their first chance all season to put Caleb Williams on a big national stage. They've either played on Pac-12 Network or late at night out on the West Coast. And so this is going to be a chance for a lot of people, I think, to get reminded, oh yeah, that's Caleb Williams. That's what he can do. He has a chance to put on a show here.
That's what we were talking about on yesterday's show. This is the casual viewer will be like, oh yeah, Caleb Williams is still awesome. How about that? But for those who have not, well, like I was on the Pac-12 Network for the San Jose State game. I've been riding all year with the Trojans, but for those who have not seen them yet, how much better is this version of Caleb Williams than even the last time everybody saw him in the Cotton Bowl?
I mean, he was so good last year. There was kind of a thought of like, really, how much better can he be? There are times this year where it feels like he's playing against some high school players, and their schedule has not been phenomenal this year. They have not played a bunch of ranked teams or anything like that. But he is so in charge. He's so confident. The throws that he makes when he buys time, it's like he knows that he can get to an edge, he can get to a throw, he can make every throw. What really stands out to me is he's thrown the ball so much this year, and really I can only come up with maybe one or two throws where it's like, oh, he probably wants that one back. He doesn't throw the ball in traffic. He doesn't ever have really a ton of turnover worthy plays. He just feels in control all the time. And that's even at Arizona State. Things are kind of going sideways and haywire, and it's their first real kind of road atmosphere where the offense is up against it. And he kind of is, there's shots of him just kind of sitting on the bench and hanging out, and like it comes off as sort of aloof and maybe separate, but that's just kind of how he rolls. He's just so confident in what he can do.
Yeah, it's interesting because Bryce Young was like that in terms of command when he was at Alabama, where you watched him walk out on the field and you're like, oh, he's got this. Caleb has that, but like an even more self-confident version, if that makes sense, with a better arm and better mobility.
There's a reason, right, that people constantly are talking about. There's Patrick Mahomes, and then there's Caleb Williams as like the best quarterbacks going right now. You want to say, he still has room to grow, and he talks about needing to improve. Lincoln Riley all the time talks about, we think he's doing pretty well, but he can get better this and this and this. And that's always true, right? Everyone will say, we can improve, we can get better. This is the stuff we need to work on. It's a treat to watch him play. And we try to remind USC fans all the time, hey, those numbers are counting down in terms of how many more times you get a chance to go see Caleb Williams play. It's fun to watch every time he goes out on the field. Speaking
of people we get to see play, I feel like Zachariah Branch is that type of person. 4 or 5 games into his college career, what can he be like? What is the ceiling there? Because it feels like he can be an incredible weapon on offense, huge weapon in the return game, and just a wow play waiting to happen at all times.
There's a reason people have started comparing him to great players. I mean, when you talk about comparisons, everybody has one, right? Everyone's tried to throw one out. And it's always like one of the 2 or 3 best players who have ever played at that program, right? It's people throw out Tavon Austin, people throw out Percy Harvin, people throw out Rocket Ishmael. At USC, it's kind of Reggie Bush, even though it's wide receiver compared to a running back. But he's that, and he's a guy you can tell with freshmen, right? The way coaches and teammates talk about a freshman, because a lot of times the players like to talk about the freshman. Oh, we like him. We think he's good. But the coaches will kind of, hey, slow down a little bit. The way the coaches talked about Zachariah Branch from day one of spring ball was like, this kid is good. This kid is different. The players talked about what he brings, that he is just a different kind of athleticism and speed and power, and just has all of that. He is blink and gone type of player. And honestly, USC hasn't had a ton of those recently. Like they always have good athletes, but that guy who's just different in terms of speed, that hasn't been something that USC has really had a lot of lately.
Yeah, I was covering Florida as a beat writer when Percy got there, and I just remember the first practice. You see him touch the ball, and you're like, I've never seen anything like that before. And I remember watching the San Jose State game, and the first, I think, punt return, Branch touches the ball. It's like, whoa, this does look kind of different.
Just pulling away from guys too as he gets down the field. I mean, that's what it is. He's not getting run down, and that was a guy at that point playing in his very first game. I mean, he still has like no experience under his belt. He's getting more and more, but no, he jumps off the screen, jumps off the field really when you see him live.
And it's so interesting talking about USC because it feels like the offense is buttoned up. Everybody's confident in it. Nobody's particularly worried about it. And especially against this Colorado team, and though Travis Hunter, you feel good about it. But they're coming off a game where they gave up 28 to Arizona State. It looked like the defense had gotten a little better, and I certainly think they've gotten better from a personnel standpoint. But how much concern is there after Cam Scatterbu, just goes crazy against them, and it's like, okay, that team just got shut out by Fresno State.
So I think that Lincoln Riley does have a point when he talks about the Arizona State team that got shut out against Fresno State is not the Arizona State team that played USC, right? That team is going to get up for USC. They had a week knowing who their quarterback was going to be. It was like family weekend. The stands were packed, all of that. But especially in that game, that last touchdown that Arizona State scored, that is almost a carbon copy of what Utah hit USC with in the Pac-12 championship game. Just a short pass to the sideline, knocked the guy out of bounds. They missed that tackle. He runs farther, throws another guy off of him, scores a touchdown. Like those kind of flashback things are still happening a little bit too much to last year. You're right. The personnel across the board for USC right now is good enough. And let's face it, coming into the season, that's all the defense needed to be. It needed to be good enough. It did not need to be a top 10 defense. They did not need to shut out Washington or go give up 3 points at Notre Dame. They needed to be good enough. And I think we've seen flashes where they can be. The position that has been the most interesting is the inside linebacker spot. And this was a spot USC plays two guys at Mike and Will, and they're a little bit interchangeable at this point, what they wanted to do there. They talked about in the spring and certainly in the fall, that being a really deep position. Well, injuries hit that group during fall camp, and they've had guys miss time. Mason Cobb missed 2 games. Eric Gentry missed a game. Shane Lee missed a lot of fall camp. So you've had 5 guys at those 2 spots kind of in and out and not super consistent in terms of time. The one guy who has been out there is Tackett Curtis. He's a true freshman, and you can tell just kind of learning, like the upside is there. Everybody believes he's going to be really good. He's still really young. He's still really experienced. It's coming. And this Arizona State game was his best game. He was the Pac-12 freshman of the week for what he did there. So, but that spot is so pivotal, right, to how they play, and guys being in and out, a little bit of rust from Mason Cobb, all of that kind of stuff. You want to see those 2 spots get locked down and start to be a lot more productive than what you've seen so far. The defensive line is creating pressure. They're getting sacks. They're a problem for quarterbacks. When does it all come together? And it's got to happen pretty quickly because the Colorado offense is coming, then Arizona, then you go to Notre Dame. I mean, it ramps up quickly and in a big way the rest of the season.
Yeah, Bear Alexander seems to have made a huge difference up front, the Georgia transfer. I do wonder if they didn't have him, if they didn't have Anthony Lucas, how much tougher would this Colorado offense be to deal with? Because it feels like they're going to be able to get some pressure on Shedeur Sanders, which should limit what they can do. I would imagine if it was last year's USC defense, Shedeur Sanders probably knitting a sweater back there and then picking them apart. So this does represent improvement. So
yeah, the one thing up front last year, it was Tui Pelotu, and that was it. He was phenomenal, right? Led the country in sacks and 22 tackles for loss. He was everywhere, but if he didn't do it, nobody did it. And this year they've been better about getting pressure from a bunch of different places. Solomon Byrd is probably a guy that not a lot of people know. He leads the team in sacks right now and has been tremendous there. He's actually the guy that's keeping Anthony Lucas off the field a little bit in terms of jumping up and being the starter at that spot. So there's more guys contributing. Jamil Muhammad is another transfer. You talk about Bear and Anthony Lucas, but Jamil Muhammad has been tremendous coming over from Georgia State. There are more players making more plays up front for USC this year compared to last year, and that's got to keep up, right? That's got to keep up against the better offensive lines, because this Colorado offensive line is just not going to be the test that USC truly needs to pass if it's going to be one of the two teams in the Pac-12 championship, if it's going to be one of the 4 teams in the playoff.
So Lincoln Riley has been highly complimentary of Deion Sanders. Deion's been highly complimentary of Lincoln Riley. Do you think we get the love fest the entire time through this after the way the Oregon game went down?
I do. I think USC has a better understanding. Like, Oregon got Colorado at its height. They got Colorado as a home game. They knew that they could make a huge statement. USC knows that this is not going to be a huge statement because there's nothing they can do to kind of one up what Oregon did. What Oregon did in that first half is what they want to do against Colorado. USC probably knows they're going to be judged against that, even though it's a completely different thing, playing on the road, playing at home, playing an undefeated team, playing a team coming off that loss. So I think USC goes in businesslike and does it. I will say this. Caleb Williams is pretty good about what he says and not putting bulletin board material out there. You can tell if he is not the most competitive player in college football, he is one of a very small handful. You know that he knows the attention Colorado has gotten, that early in the season, it was Shedeur Sanders as, the potential Heisman Trophy candidate in the Pac-12. My feel is that Caleb Williams, again, is not going to say anything and is going to be very complimentary of everything that goes on. My feel is he wants to go in there and show what this offense and what he really can do when the conversation turns to, oh, hey, there's 2 really good quarterbacks in this game. I think there's a real feel that he wants to separate himself.
Well, and he'll get a chance against a bunch of other really good quarterbacks the rest of the year. And that's the interesting thing for me with USC. It's because the Pac-12, they hadn't been able to get a team in the playoff, but now we all agree that it's the deepest league in the country. And it feels like if you're USC, especially with Notre Dame still on the schedule, all you've got to do is take care of business. And you've probably even got a mulligan in there somewhere, depending on how it goes. But is it easier to go game to game when it is, you've got big challenges up ahead, and if you overcome them, you'll get where you want to go?
I think so. I think it's also easier to maybe erase some of the thoughts of the struggles at Arizona State, because at the end of the year, nobody cares. Nobody cares about you. You just have to win those games. And if you go beat Oregon by 1 point and Notre Dame by 1 point and Washington by 1 point, like, you have enough wins. It's the first time we've been able to say anything remotely close to this about a USC schedule. You have enough games late in the year where if you just win them, and like you said, there's probably a game in there you can lose. If you win enough of them to get into the Pac-12 championship game and you win that game, that's all you have to do. So putting win after win. They didn't need to beat Notre Dame last week, right? When they're playing in Tempe, they didn't need to win those games. So you can still learn from that and grow and kind of piece your season together. It's just about winning each game. And Lincoln talked a little bit about that today, not needing to send a message or change a narrative or anything. Like, he knows even after a loss, if you just keep winning, you're going to be okay at the end of the season. And that's absolutely how it sets up for really anyone in the Pac-12 this year. Like, there's nobody who misses enough teams. Even UCLA, like, they don't get Oregon and Washington, which feels great until you realize you have to play Washington State and Oregon State, which are two pretty good teams also. So there's just not a lot of good misses in the Pac-12 this year. You're going to play some good teams.
Well, that's what I love with just being able to compare Caleb Williams, because Saturday we get to see him against Shedeur Sanders. We're going to get to see him against Bo Nix. We're going to get to see him against Dante Moore. We're going to get to see him against, hopefully Michael Penix Jr. Like that's going to be so much fun. And I think that's what makes that league fun this year, and crazy that it's going away. Are you getting ready to figure out how to slot them into the Big Ten race, or is that just something you put off until next year?
No, you definitely take more notice of what's going on in the Big Ten. Not that we didn't, follow it before this, but yeah, how does it fit? What are those road trips like? What will they do? I think this is a really interesting weekend for USC, playing at 9:00 Pacific time, right? 10:00 there. That window is clearly going to be key to the Big Ten. And if USC wants to be a part of it, are there 9 a.m. home games at the Coliseum? I mean, for the future, I mean, it becomes something. If Ohio State USC is out in Los Angeles, again, not that this has been discussed or anything like that publicly. It's kind of a curiosity though about how they fit into this really early time slot moving forward.
Well, and there definitely are going to be noon Eastern kicks in Ann Arbor and noon Eastern kicks in Columbus and State College and 11 Central kicks in Madison. So yeah, the body clock, they better get used to the early their time body clock.
And Colorado, this is their 5th game. They've played 3 games, 10 a.m. local time. This will be their 3rd. So Colorado is used to this. This is another, USC struggled with its first road game last week. They've talked a lot about, we'll deal with the early time. It's not a huge thing. We can figure it out. They talked about, we can figure out the road atmosphere and we know what's coming and all of that last week, and struggled with it. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on. It's one thing, and I know these are all young guys and their bodies can react differently than coaches or people who are there watching. But it's definitely something to keep in mind that Colorado has some experience playing at this time, and USC does not. They're coming off back-to-back 7:30 p.m. Pacific time games, and you're flipping all the way to the other side of the day to play this one.
Bright and early. Can't wait. Erik McKinney, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cannot wait for this USC-Colorado game. I hope it's more interesting than USC-Oregon. Don't know. Mr. Big Play Bray asked in the chat, are you hearing the thing on Deion and Cormani McClain? Deion seems tired of him, ? Cormani McClain is a 5-star cornerback. He's a freshman this year. He was a big-time recruit in the class of 2023. He's from Lakeland, Florida. He had been committed to Miami. I think the Florida folks thought they were going to get him for a little while. He ended up signing with Colorado. He's not playing right now, other than a little bit in garbage time against Oregon. And Deion was asked about him this week and said basically, hey, you got to show up to meetings on time. You got to do the right things. You got to practice the way your older and more experienced teammates practice. Deion's just saying stuff out loud that most coaches don't say in public. That's what this is. The assumption is all 5-star recruits just come in and play, are awesome right away. That's not true. Some of them do take time. Some of them are not ready right away. And Cormani McClain clearly wasn't ready right away. And most coaches will just sort of tap dance around that. Or Dan Wolken from USA Today, I think he pointed out, this is the sort of thing that a coach would call a reporter off the record and plant, so that, because they get all those questions, but they would sidestep them. They wouldn't answer them directly. Deion just answers it. So it's up to Cormani McClain if he wants to play, it sounds like. And if he doesn't, I'm sure Deion would be happy to have that roster spot back. So I don't think there's really any question. This is one of the interesting things about Deion Sanders is he is so much more forward, I guess, than a lot of other coaches, where he just says these things that most coaches will not say publicly. Another coach who says things that you're kind of surprised to hear a coach say in public is Auburn's Hugh Freeze. He's always been like that. And whether it was Ole Miss or Liberty, he'd say things in press conferences and you say, wow, I don't think I've ever heard a coach just say that. And this week was no different. On the SEC teleconference, Hugh Freeze was pretty open about how he is struggling with the fact that he's given up play calling. And this was a conscious choice by him. It wasn't anything anybody told him he had to do. He got the Auburn job, and basically they said, do it the way you want to do it. And he said, well, the head coach job, the CEO job in the SEC is so much bigger than it was when I was at Ole Miss. I'm going to hire Philip Montgomery to be my offensive coordinator, former Tulsa head coach, former Baylor offensive coordinator. I'm going to have him call the plays. Well, through 4 games, Hugh Freeze said openly he's kind of regretting that decision. And it's hard for him to not be involved in the play calling. We talked to Justin Hokanson of On3's Auburn Live about that situation and just what Auburn needs to do to get better as, oh, by the way, the number 1 team in the country, the Georgia Bulldogs, come to Jordan-Hare Stadium this weekend. Here's Justin. Joined now by Justin Hokanson of Auburn Live. And Justin, it's got to feel like deja vu this week. Hugh Freeze goes on the SEC teleconference and says, I'm struggling with the not calling plays anymore. How many flashbacks to Gus Malzahn and will he or won't he, or Rhett Lashley or Chip Lindsey? Like, how was that this week?
Yeah, a lot of flashbacks. I mean, Gus called plays, then he turned it over to Rhett, then he took them back, then he turned them over to Chip, then he took them back. I say took them back. Chip Lindsey left, and then he was like, I'm going to call plays. This is what I should have been doing all along. So, yeah, a lot of flashbacks. I mean, I think what the Auburn fans are frustrated about and what we hear on the message board is, why now? They're like, why are you using this opportunity now as the guinea pig? Like, you get this job, you've called plays at Ole Miss, you called plays at Liberty, and then you get to Auburn, and Auburn fans are ready to win, and they're like, now you want to run the experiment where you don't call plays? Like, why is this the experiment program? What are we doing? Like, I think that's their frustration. Like, you could have done this at any point. You get here and now you want to play around with this not calling plays thing. And like, logically, I guess there's you kind of makes sense. Like, you're at Auburn, NIL, portal. There's a lot more going on. So it's the
same thing Gus said this year, because remember, Gus got the UCF job and said, I'm never giving up play calling again. And then this year he's like, yeah, I'm giving it up. Too much other stuff going on. So, well, maybe him and
Gus talk. You and Gus are buddies. Maybe they had got together and thought and agreed on the same line of thinking. But yeah, it's just been the comments from Freeze have been interesting on that, because I don't think it's an indictment on Philip Montgomery. Freeze has said that, and I also believe that. Like, I don't think he's going, the play calling sucks. I think it's an internal thing with Hugh Freeze right now, where he's like, I want to be involved, but I don't know how to not be involved, but I don't want to overstep my bounds and confuse people. And it's like, dude, the terminology, just get involved or don't get involved. I think Auburn fans just want points. You need points to win. Like, do what it takes to win the game and quit overthinking it.
Well, and that's the thing, is Hugh Freeze is a very good play caller. And that is why he's where he's at. He did it when he was at Ole Miss. He did it at Liberty. And I think, I can see the frustration there, because I'm not used to seeing a Hugh Freeze offense that doesn't work. I can't remember a Hugh Freeze offense that didn't work. And so that's the part I would imagine for Auburn fans is like, okay, we got Hugh Freeze. There are going to be some points. And it's just nothing.
Yeah, they're starting to see the is Jordan-Hare above like an old Indian burial ground type stuff. Like, why, because I told our board, I think a lot of the frustration from Auburn fans is, outside of 2017, this is now, we're going on 9 years of just inconsistent, disjointed offense, outside of a couple of moments here and there throughout the years. Really, since 15 on, about 9 years of just kind of good game, bad game, good game, fall on your face. And it's exhausting for Auburn fans. That's why after one game of Hugh Freeze, they're like, dude, like, what is the deal? Can we not produce an effective offense?
It's so funny, though, because, when I talk to Florida fans, they're like, can anybody get Billy Napier to stop calling plays and hire an offensive coordinator? Everybody just wants the thing that isn't what they have now if it's not working.
Yeah.
But the thing that makes it interesting with Freeze is he's very open about, this has been a struggle for me. And I'm sure when he is in the middle of the game, he's thinking, I'm not sure I would have called that, or I would have done this way. Or it's got to be it's got to be pretty maddening for him. And I think you're right. Like, I think if you've never met Hugh Freeze, you would read what he said or hear what he said on the SEC teleconference and go, oh, he doesn't think Philip Montgomery's doing a good job. I don't think that's what it is at all. I think Hugh's just saying, this is how I feel right now. I would like, there are moments when I would like to be calling the plays again, and I realize I have decided not to.
Yep, that's my take on it. I mean, because he after the Cal game, he said that was an ugly game, but he goes, I thought the game plan was good. I thought some of the play calling was good. After A&M, he said, go watch the film. We had receivers open. You had inopportune turnovers at Cal, and you had inopportune penalties at Texas A&M. So yeah, I don't think it's a worry about Montgomery's play calling. There's so many other things that are going wrong with Auburn's offense: turnovers, penalties, errant throws. There's so many other issues that you can't really put it on Montgomery. But it is the one thing Freeze said that the other thing I thought was interesting was he said, "I'm transparent. Everybody in the building knows how I feel about this." So I'm curious how those conversations have gone with Philip Montgomery. Does Freeze just walk into the office and go, man, I'm struggling, man. I want to be involved. Is he that? I guess he's that transparent with Montgomery. That's the only good thing about this is Philip Montgomery at least knows what's going on. He's not blindsided. He's like, I get it. He wants to be involved. I can imagine. At least he's being honest about it. So Philip Montgomery's not reading this in the paper or reading this online going, geez, like, is this guy, so I think there's at least some openness there.
Well, at least they're not playing the best collection of defensive talent in the country. Oh, wait. They are playing the best collection of defensive talent in the country this weekend. With Georgia coming in, what can Auburn do to be better? You mentioned that there have been guys open. I think Hugh Freeze said that this week. There are plays that they could have hit that they just didn't. Peyton Thorne may have missed the throw, or somebody may have gone the wrong direction. But what can they do to have a chance against Georgia?
Well, start with turnovers and penalties. In their 2 Power 5 games, Cal and A&M, they're doing one of those. They had 4 turnovers at Cal. They had 10 offensive penalties at A&M. 2 of those were intentional delay games, so really call it 8. But still, you're both those games, you're either turnovers or penalties are crushing your drives. They're ending your drives, completely ending them. So number one, start by playing a clean game. Now that's tough. You're playing Georgia. I get it, but don't turn the ball over and commit a penalty. Fine, but don't commit a holding penalty when you just had a 15-yard run that got you down to the 25-yard line. Like, play a cleaner game. That's one. I think 2 is for Peyton Thorne. He's got to figure out the pocket presence thing. He's a little rushed. He's getting a little rattled. He's not keeping his eyes downfield. That's got to be figured out. I don't know how that's going to happen. They're working on that this week, but his eyes they're locking on, and then he's looking to run. And so he's got to be a little more composed in there, sidestep pressure, keep his eyes downfield for receivers that are open so you can hit them. Those 2 things alone would go a long way in helping Auburn's offense. They've run the ball effectively at times. I think they're second in the league in rushing. They've got a good stable of running backs. They ran the ball. Cal and A&M, both those games, they had success running the ball. So there's some success there to be had. If you can figure out turnovers and penalties, and you can figure out how to keep Peyton Thorne's eyes downfield, the passing game will open up a little bit. I think those couple things, the offense will look very different. And I think those 3 things are somewhat, you can fix those things: turnovers, penalties, and just tell Peyton, keep watching downfield. And this thing could look different. It really could.
So Eugene Asante looked pretty good carrying the ball on that one play. Can he play off it? No, this is a guy who has just been everything on defense. How important is he to that defense?
Yeah, he's been pretty big. He's a guy that transferred from North Carolina last year and then really just got lost in the shuffle. He was about 10 pounds lighter, good athlete, 4-star kind of player, but came over from North Carolina, got lost in the shuffle in 2022. A big part of that is he lost his dad in February of last year. And that, as you can imagine, that took its toll on him. He was a different guy, different player last year, and he struggled. He couldn't get on the field, and I think it was just a mental battle with him. But he stuck it out. He didn't transfer. He decided to stay. He put on 10 pounds. and he's been really good. He's a fantastic athlete, leading the team in tackles. Still some alignment issues at times. Freeze admitted, we're still trying to get him lined up correctly every time, but he's that SEC linebacker. Tons of energy, tons of speed, physical, hits hard. I mean, he's what you're used to seeing from Auburn at linebacker. They're just thin. They don't have a lot of guys at that position. His health is of the utmost importance. He cannot get injured, and they need him in there bad. But he's been a bright spot. He's been a bright spot, no doubt.
Well, and like Keldrick Faulk's an interesting one because top 100 recruit, which is something Auburn hadn't had in a couple of years, and they're obviously not thrusting him in saying you're playing every down. They're putting him in selectively, but it seems like he's showing up when he gets in the game.
Yeah, I would agree with that. He doesn't start, but when he's in there, I think he played probably 23 snaps against A&M, but he had 3 tackles and a quarterback pressure. And so, yeah, he's one of those guys that he's not playing a lot of snaps yet, but when he's in there, he flashes. He's playing a different game. You can see why he was ranked where he was and why Florida State wanted him, and Auburn went in there and was like, we got to steal this guy back. Being from right there around Montgomery, he would be on that Florida State team right now, by the way. So,
man.
Yeah. So, I mean, he looks different. Like a true freshman, he looks, the way that Marlon Davidson did when he comes in and looks and at Auburn, you're like, okay, that dude for a true freshman looks the part. I mean, you see Keldrick, there's times against A&M where he ragdolled the tackle on the other side. So, like, his potential is high, and he was a little banged up at the end of fall camp. I think he's getting pretty healthy now, and he's a guy that could be, if he can keep getting better, they need him because they're struggling rushing the passer with the front. They're basically having to bring a nickel or having to blitz a linebacker. Jalen McLeod, the transfer from App State, has been banged up, trying to get healthy. So between Keldrick Faulk or Jalen McLeod, one of those dudes, those guys got to keep coming on because they've got some ability that nobody else has. But Keldrick Faulk, man, bright future. I'm really interested to see him against the best, against Georgia's offensive line. Like, let's see what he can go out there and do as a newcomer.
How do you handle that if you're Hugh Freeze, not just with Faulk, but in general in terms of playing time? Because this is essentially a year zero for you. Do you go young and just try to get experience for everybody so that going into next year, when you feel like the roster's in a better place, you have experienced players? Or do you just keep trying the older guys because they have played some and they do know, sort of what they're doing?
Yeah, I think the quarterback position will be an interesting barometer of that. The next couple games, if Peyton Thorne continues to struggle, do you say, you know what, who hasn't gotten a chance? Holden Gerner. We're going to toss the redshirt freshman out there. I think that'll be a good barometer. I don't know, man. I mean, with the transfer portal, I wonder how much, if you're a head coach, can you continue to have that mindset where you go, you know what, this is a wash. I'm going to play a bunch of young guys, because I feel like with the portal now, people aren't giving you any passes. You have like no passes, even for a first-year coach. It's like you go out and get a portal class. Auburn's portal class, some thought was certainly probably one of the top 3 classes in terms of talent and needs and all that. I don't know I don't know how much of a pass you get anymore to go, well, let's play a bunch of young guys this year and get them, because you can go in the portal and replenish that where you couldn't before. So, I don't know. I mean, Hugh's so competitive. He wants to win. And I think he knows at Auburn he needs to win. And there's good enough players there. They should be in a bowl game. I get what Hugh said about the talent gap before an A&M. And yes, there is a talent gap between A&M, Georgia, Bama, LSU. But Auburn's still, blue chip wise, Auburn's still in the top 15 in the country.
Right. Auburn shouldn't feel like there's a big gap. Like after you get away from Georgia, before Alabama, like there shouldn't be a lot of gaps after that.
No, they've got a good enough roster to be in a bowl. So I don't. A performance like A&M, you go out there and lose 31-10 at home to Georgia. I get it, man, but I don't think there's that. There's a gap, but I don't think there's that kind of gap.
Well, it'll be very interesting to see what they do, because they are going to play potentially the most talented team in the country this weekend. So we shall see. But Justin, appreciate it.
Anytime, man.
Justin Hokanson from AuburnLive.com. It's a very interesting situation there at Auburn, and you'll wonder if Hugh Freeze at some point says, you know what, I got to call plays. It's what I do. It's hard. It's very difficult. One coach working on making sure his team is prepared this week, James Franklin at Penn State. They practiced for a while with no music at Penn State, where they usually do have something going on during practices, because he wanted to simulate what it could be at an 11 a.m. local time kickoff at Northwestern, which could be fairly quiet, especially if Penn State plays as well as they did against Iowa. It might just be the Penn State fans who traveled to Chicagoland. By the way, Do Right Donuts, if you happen to be in Chicagoland anytime soon, just give it a shot. They do chicken sandwiches, but they also do incredible donuts. So Do Right Donuts, give it a shot. I brought a dozen with me when I did my Pardon My Take guest spot on when I recorded that on Tuesday. I think I made a lot of new friends because those things are awesome. So James Franklin, also trying to keep himself amused during a press conference this week, turned it into a discussion of that drink that keeps most of us going.
I'm good. I'm ready.
Rich, are you a coffee guy?
I'm a big coffee guy.
Black or like ice cream sundae?
Black.
I'm an ice
A
cream.
little bit of cream.
Yeah, I'm an ice cream sundae guy, but I've been doing this fasting. I drink it black, and just like you shake your head about the ice cream sundae, I shake my head about the black. I hate the black. It's like punishment. That's what I got right now. It's like
Love
punishment.
black coffee. If it's good coffee.
You always loved it, or you've grown to love it?
As I've matured, I've grown to love it.
You calling me immature?
No, I'm calling myself mature instead of another adjective.
Gotcha.
Older.
Gotcha.
Okay.
I've never been man enough to drink black coffee. Now, like James Franklin, I do the intermittent fasting. I've been doing it since January of 2020. And for the first couple of years I did it, I followed the rules very strictly, where if I had coffee in the morning, it was black coffee, nothing that might activate my metabolic system. And so I did it, but my wife said, you are the most miserable human being on earth until 11 a.m. when you start eating. So you have to do something different. You have to change. And at the time I said, well, if I could just drink the kind of coffee I like, and I'm with James Franklin here, I want the cream and the sweetener. So I said, okay, I will do that. So I did. I read up. Now, sources close to James Franklin tell me that there's a belief that the sweetener will activate your metabolism and that you should not be using that. I will say that I read a lot, and yes, some of them do. What I read said stevia doesn't, and it might be me just believing what I want to believe. But I added cream and sweetener coffee back instead of drinking it black. And it allowed me to stave off that first meal even longer. And it didn't really change the amount of calories I ate. So I drink about a pot of coffee a day. And I got to tell you, if James Franklin were to add the cream and the sweetener, and I go heavy cream, by the way, not half and half, not milk, heavy cream, because that real fat in there does tell your stomach and your system that you're full and you don't need to eat anymore. So I don't know if James Franklin switched to that, does Penn State get even better? But James Franklin, I don't know. People kept trying to ask about turnovers and that sort of thing. He just wanted to know about coffee.
James, how are you?
Hey, Mike, black or sweetener and cream?
Sweetener and cream.
I'm good. I'm a black coffee guy.
You are. You beat me to the punch. You just said I'm gonna steal his thunder. Always black coffee?
For the most part. I drink coffee enough that I like it, but not so much that I need it.
The cold brew with sweet cold foam, with the cold foam on top, is really good.
What is the calories in that?
It's only like 80 calories.
Oh, yeah.
As long as you don't get extra creamer or sugar with it, you don't really need it.
Right, but I'm doing this fasting, so it's got to be 0 calories.
It skipped a generation with me. My mom drank coffee. My daughter drinks coffee. I don't drink coffee.
At all?
Not at all.
Never have?
Nope.
Impressive. Do you drink tea?
If I'm not feeling well, maybe, but no, I'm not like
Red Bull?
I'm not like a hot beverage person.
Red Bull?
No comment on what I drink. Yeah, no comment on.
Like you, cream and sugar, all the nonsense. It's the only way to drink it.
Does this stat make sense, or maybe
Mike.
you can explain it?
There's a theme going on here. Times of the day that make
Coffee
you drink.
first thing in the morning. Usually Wednesday nights I have tea ahead of practice. 'Cause it's a late night for me.
No coffee, no tea, but I'm a big caffeine guy. So you could write this down. Celsius energy drink. It's got a lot of good stuff in it, not a lot of calories. I would recommend that.
I didn't write it down because I'm all over it.
Okay.
I'm taking notes here on the Celsius there. My former coworker, Audrey Snyder at The Athletic, I like that she goes the coffee to the tea. And then later in that press conference, James Franklin was introduced to the concept of peppermint tea, which I will say, as another person who does the intermittent fasting, peppermint tea is a tremendous morning drink when you're trying to stave off that first meal. It's delicious and just curbs the appetite. Just so. So that is your intermittent fasting update with Andy Staples with an assist from James Franklin. I got to say, that's probably more interesting than him answering questions about going to Ryan Field this week. But we'll see. Who knows? Northwestern, very plucky, beating Minnesota last week. Can they shock the world and beat Penn State? Probably not. But we know that James Franklin will be adequately caffeinated when they play. The question is, will he have broken his fast? We'll find out. Guys, it's game week. Let's go. We'll talk to you again on Saturday.